Thank you, Matthew, for inviting me to speak today and conducting this symposium. So I'm going to be talking on the right to a healthy environment. Particularly given the nature of this topic, I would first like to personally acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the land where QUT now stands, and recognise their continuing connections to surrounding lands, waters and communities. Indigenous communities are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, especially in relation to their laws, customs and culture, and I feel this adds valuable context into which to also think about this topic. So in 2022, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution that declared everyone on the planet has a right to a healthy environment. Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of the UN's Environmental Programme, claimed this resolution sends a message that nobody can take nature, clean air and water or a stable climate away from us, at least not without a fight. This resolution comes at a time where the planet faces what Anderson describes as a triple planetary crisis: the climate change, the loss of biodiversity and pollution. The resolution warns that if left unaddressed, these challenges could have devastating impacts on people worldwide, especially marginalised individuals and communities. So a clean, healthy and sustainable environment is a new recognised right, and I feel the Summit of the Future presented a perfect stage to present the importance of this right for both current and future generations. So my presentation today is going to provide an overview of the current environmental crisis that we're facing today. I would then like to analyse the approach the Pact to the Future took in relation to environmental protections and highlight any gaps that need urgent attention. I would then like to specifically define the right to a healthy environment and introduce how implementing such a right can offer a chance for transformative change that is going to be needed if we are combating this environmental crisis. I will then provide some examples of how the right is being implemented and establish what is next for Australia. So the effects of the environmental crisis can be seen all over the world, from the climate emergency to collapsing biodiversity, pollution of air, water and soil, worsening water scarcity, desertification and land degradation. These interconnected catastrophes are undermining the life support system that humans and millions of other species around the world depend upon. The environmental crisis has profound impacts on human health, ecosystem health, and the ability of billions of people, both now and into the future, to enjoy a broad range of human rights. Among these rights are the right to life, health, food, water, sanitation, cultural rights, the rights of the child, and of course the rights to a healthy, clean environment. Concerningly, the adverse impacts fall disproportionately among the vulnerable, marginalised and poverty-stricken communities, creating climate and environmental injustices. The underlying drivers of these interconnected crises are economical, political, social, legal and cultural systems that prioritise extractivism, profit and economic growth at the expense of people, nature, human rights and community well-being. Alarmingly, the richest 1% of humanity generates the same volume of greenhouse gas emissions than the poorest 66%. Excessive consumption in wealthy nations combined with growing global population has pushed humanity to exceed multiple planetary boundaries. By mid-August this year, society already consumed more resources than the Earth can generate in a year. This has left us in a dire state known as ecological overshoot. In 2015, the world committed to eradicating poverty and hunger while securing the planet's future, with a pledge to leave no one behind. While some progress has been made, the realisation of Sustainable Development Goals has been scant. Progress on most goals has stalled or even regressed below the 2015 baseline, reversing years of development gains. Poverty, hunger and inequality have risen, human rights are increasingly at risk, and millions are in danger of being left behind. The mounting environmental challenges now jeopardise not only the natural environment, but also prospects for future sustainable development. The Summit of the Future presented an opportunity for world leaders to protect the needs and interests of both present and future generations by reaffirming the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a key to achieving all three interconnected dimensions of sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. The Pact for the Future aims to ensure institutions can deliver a better future for both people and the planet, enabling the fulfilment of existing commitments while also rising to new and emerging challenges. With the emergence of advanced science, technology and innovation, this gives us the chance to promote global transformation as a mechanism for progress and advancement of sustainability. To that end, the Pact of the Future recognises human rights and fundamental freedoms are independent and mutually reinforcing. The Pact for the Future provides us an important framework for addressing the triple planetary environmental crisis. However, it places unequal emphasis on the three dimensions of climate change, biodiversity, and pollution. It does not specifically reference the environmental rule of law and only partly recognises the right to a healthy environment. So first, climate change is given significantly more focus in the Pact of the Future, with Action 9 being the longest and most detailed. It also is addressed beyond its specific action items, such as calls to accelerate the reform of international financial architecture to meet the urgent challenge of climate change, and the request for an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on states' obligations regarding climate change. Notably, the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is mentioned within the climate change action item rather than in action item 9, which is dedicated to restoring, protecting, conserving and sustainably using the environment. Similarly, while climate change action reaffirms the Paris Agreement's temperature goal and acknowledges several 2030 targets, it does not reference the other two objectives of Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. Moreover, apart from vague mentioning of implementing the framework to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 and honouring all multinational agreements, there is little acknowledgement of specific targets such as restoring 30% of degraded ecosystems or conserving 30% of terrestrial and marine areas by 2030. While implementation is rightly prioritised, this broad reference to all multinational environmental agreements would have benefited from a stronger commitment to accelerated efforts addressed to pollution of air, land, soil, freshwater, and our oceans. Additionally, in the contents of legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including the marine environment, the focus on concluding negotiations by the end of 2024 is significant but insufficient. Greater attention must be given to the substance of the treaty to ensure it achieves transformative outcomes. So the Pact emphasises the importance of the rule of law, but it does not explicitly reference the environmental rule of law. This omission represents a lost opportunity to establish a robust framework that links legal accountability with environmental sustainability. A stronger focus on the environment rule of law could have reinforced the Pact's ambition to deliver a breakthrough to a better and more sustainable future for all. Although the Pact includes a positive reference to human rights, its acknowledgement of the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment is limited. It only specifically mentions it in relation to the ability of young persons to enjoy their human rights and a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. However, this narrow framing runs the risk of diluting the urgency and universality of the critical right and almost positions the issue as a future problem instead of one that needs to be acted upon now, for current and future generations. Embedding it as a central pillar of the Pact would strengthen its role as a foundational component for achieving global sustainability and combating this environmental crisis. Overall, the Pact for the Future outlines meaningful commitments and priorities, but could have gone further in addressing these gaps. Equal emphasis on all dimensions of the environmental crisis, explicitly recognising the environmental rule of law, and a stronger framing of the right to a healthy environment as a universal priority would enhance the Pact's ability to drive transformative action and build a sustainable and equitable future. So what actually is the right to a healthy environment? At minimum, the right to a healthy environment includes the right to enjoy clean air, safe and sufficient access to water, healthy and sustainable produced foods, safe climate, healthy biodiversity and ecosystems, and non-toxic environments in which to work, live, learn and play. The right to a healthy environment also guarantees access to environmental education and information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice with effective remedies. It's also closely linked to the freedom of expression, freedom of association, and the freedom of assembly. While many human rights are linked to the quality of environment, for example, the right to life, health, and water, the right to a healthy environment is unique because it provides a comprehensive protection against the full range of environmental harms, including damage to nature. The right to a healthy environment is now legally recognised in more than 80% of the UN member states through constitutions, legislation, and regional treaties. In Latin America, the courts have taken an ecocentric approach, recognising the right to a healthy environment has two elements. First, it includes environments that are healthy for humans, meaning clean air, safe water, a safe climate, sustainably produced foods, and freedom from exposure of toxic chemicals. Secondly, it also includes the right to guarantee environments that are ecologically healthy regardless of their direct impacts on humans. Examples of how this right can be seen by the Supreme Court of Colombia, who in 2016 recognised the violation of the right to a healthy environment of Indigenous people in the Atrato River Basin, based on the lack of effective control of mining activities. The court also recognised the Atrato River as a legal subject that possesses its own enforceable rights, that is, the right to nature. Similar decisions have also been made in Colombia, including recognising the right to 2 national parks and the Colombian portion of the Amazon rainforest. Additionally, in 2023, the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Costa Rica relied on the right to a healthy environment to overturn regulation that permitted fishing of 3 species of hammerhead sharks because these hammerhead sharks are endangered. Recognising the right to a healthy environment in Australia. So the ACT government has been the first state or territory to enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Amendment Bill passed in August, providing express statutory recognition for the right to a clean, health and sustainable environment. The ACT continues to be a leader in rights both nationally and internationally, and this bill takes an unprecedented step in human rights legislation reform in Australia. Complaints about breaches to the right to a healthy environment will be able to be made at the ACT Human Rights Commission under new human rights complaints pathway, which is being established by the government. By enshrining the right to a healthy environment in their Human Rights Act, the ACT is safeguarding the future of nature reserves, the environment, and the well-being of future generations. Significantly, this change recognises the deep-rooted wisdom and the way of life upheld by First Nations in Australia for millennia. It acknowledges that a healthy and positive relationship with the environment is a fundamental to thriving and fulfilling life. The only hope is that the ACT government's leadership will set a precedent, inspiring other states and territories to adopt the right. So why the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment is a powerful leverage for change. History has demonstrated that human rights can be a catalyst for transformative changes in society. In 2010, the recognition of the right to sanitation and clean water spurred countries across the globe to add drinking water protections to their constitutions. Inga Anderson said the latest resolution recognising the right to a healthy environment has the same historic potential, claiming the resolution will trigger environmental action and provide necessary safeguards to people all over the world. It will help people stand up for the right to breathe clean air, to access safe and sufficient water, healthy food, healthy ecosystems, and non-toxic environments in which to live, work, study, and play. While human rights are not an instant or all-encompassing solution, they have repeatedly proven to be a catalyst for meaningful change. By fostering international cooperation, transparency, education, and awareness, governments can inspire global transformation to protect, restore, and preserve the environment for current and future generations. The right to a healthy environment has been shown to deliver significant benefits, including stronger environmental laws and policies, improved implementation and enforcement of those laws, increased levels of public participation in environmental decision-making, increased access to information and access to justice, and reduced environmental injustices. These effects are reflected in track records of global leaders, including Costa Rica, Colombia, France, Portugal, and Slovenia. This transformative potential makes it vital for civil society to advocate for rights-based approaches to climate change and environmental action, especially in the light of the evidence demonstrating that the ineffectiveness of actions taken to date that have failed to incorporate rights. The limited implementation of rights-based approaches in addressing planetary crisis has hindered progress in sustainable development. In 1992, the Earth Summit in Rio yielded 3 multinational environmental agreements: the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Biological Diversity, and the Convention to Combat Desertification. However, none of these treaties specifically mention human rights, and more than 30 years later, progress under these agreements remains disappointing. Global greenhouse gas emissions have surged by over 65% since 1992. The burning of coal, gas and oil has accelerated, and the world is on track for 2.7 degrees of warming, far exceeding the Paris Agreement's goals, and posing catastrophic risks for human rights, including the right to a healthy environment. Commitments to conserve biodiversity and combat desertification has also gone largely unfulfilled. A central weakness of international environmental law is the effective compliance and enforcement mechanisms, leading to limited accountability. The integration of environmental rule of law with human rights laws offers a new hope. This approach enables civil society, communities, and Indigenous people to hold governments and corporations accountable for their environmental commitments. Recognising the right to a healthy environment serves as both a shield and a sword. A shield to protect ecosystems and communities from harm, and a sword to drive legal and policy changes that ensure environmental preservation for present and future generations. By embedding this right at the heart of the climate and environmental governance, humanity can address the shortcomings of past efforts and build a more equitable and sustainable future for present and future generations. United Nations member states should leverage negotiations on the Pact for the Future to reaffirm their commitments to strengthening human rights, including advancing economic justice and safeguarding the right to environmental well-being. By explicitly endorsing the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment, governments are to implement on the urgent basis systematic changes such as redefining the goals of society away from endless economic loss towards living in harmony with nature, shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy, eliminating plastic pollution, and creating a circular economy designed to avoid toxic wastes and substances. Without urgent and transformative changes financed by the most responsible for creating and exacerbating the planetary crisis, it will be impossible to respect, protect, and fulfill all human rights. In conclusion, Australia must strengthen its environmental rule of law and adopt a comprehensive legislation and regulations to respect, protect, and fulfill the right to a healthy environment. By having open and transparent governments, free access to environmental information, high levels of public participation in environmental decision-making, and relatively easy access to justice and remedies, Australia can equip future generations to thrive in a clean, healthy, and sustainable world. Thank you.